I'm Daniel Whiteside, and with me today is Kathy Brennan, with whom I have been playing in my mind with how to make all of that which was created by myself and my life partner, Gordon Stokes, and Albertine Fawn. And the three of us have been developing the understanding of the work created by Gordon Stokes and Daniel Whiteside that relates to partnering with life. What is life? Life is opportunity. Life is challenge. And how we handle our awareness and our response to the opportunity and our response to the challenge determines whether we are moving into a partnership with life, which is really oneness within ourselves and with the world around us, or whether we are allowing our negative expectations based on our past experience to move us downward to separation and to no choice. Life is opportunity. Life is what we do when confronted or faced with a challenge. And it is either going to be to make the choice when challenged for the positive possible, or it would be a simple negative standard reaction emotionally, which would take us to separation and no choice and no partnership with life. With our videographer, Achille Garnier, at the camera, here is a toast to partnering with life.
Here's to you, Achille.
A partnership with life, partnering, the action of partner and partner together to create what? The positive possible for ourselves at any given moment. And making the choice to acknowledge and to accept that opportunity as the possibility of creating the future we want, as opposed to allowing ourselves, if we feel not accepting and are into antagonism and feel attacked, the horror story of the negative reaction going downscale to separation and no choice. So once again, here's to oneness, oneness with ourselves, within ourselves, and with life. Gordon Stokes, wonderful man, and my life partner for over 40 years, both professionally and personally, found that there were three elements that were very important to understanding our power. And our power is all about choice. The choice for a positive possible future, or the reaction, which is functionally automatic and no choice, to what we perceive as a negative challenge, which just takes us back through our own failures of past experience down to feeling that we have no choice except to stimulus response, knee-jerk, try to resist what is presented with the challenge. And those three elements are an evaluation formula for recognizing what emotion we are dealing with truly in the moment, and whether we're going upscale toward oneness or downscale to separation and no choice. And that's the usual trip that we all take emotionally. What are the three elements? A way to evaluate our emotional response or reaction in the moment when challenged or faced with a positive opportunity. And that emotional evaluation we'll take up in another section in this YouTube series. Then comes structure function, and for most people who are looking at it, this presentation, that's a whole new concept. Structure equals function. And where does that come from? What are we looking at? So taking a look at Daniel, taking a look at Kathy, taking a look at Albertine, you're looking at structures. You're looking at structures of the skull, which relate to brain activity. You're looking at features of the face, which also express brain activity or natural inclination of reaction to stressors, either negative or positive. Because the real positive stressor is to be presented with what you truly want and then feeling enough self-doubt not to move in that direction, which is a horror story that we all know. Structure function. Do you realize that looking at a human being, a human structure, in 5 seconds, you can know what to expect of that structure's function, because structure, jaws, bones, skin, hair, body shape, body balance, all of that is going to be with you from the time you were conceived until the time you die. And simply looking at an individual tells you what their structure is and how it is going to function. Then there's the third element, which is what do you do with this information? How do you make a positive choice when confronted with an opportunity or a challenge? What do you do to handle the negative emotions that you will feel if you feel that you are being attacked? Structure function. Can you really, in 5 seconds, look at a person's structure and come up with some idea about what's going on and what to expect of them? Take a look at the baby. This is a universal structure. All of us as babies had this kind of head shape, nose shape, lips. Look at the shape of the forehead. The forehead is the conscious associational thinking area of the brain. Look at the back of the skull. This is the primary visual center. What does that tell you about the baby? That tells you that what they see visually, they will associate with past experience or present example and draw some conclusions. They have a learning machine. We all had this marvelous learning machine. Primarily for an infant, it is based on what we see, we think about, and we reach some conclusions. Yes, the baby structure had a different brain functioning priority than the adult. Let's move the camera back to include the adult that's with that baby. And on the photograph, you see that the forehead is different. You see that there is much more jaw prominence. You also see that the back of the skull is not the same in my adult self as it was in the baby self. What does that mean? That means something. And that something is structure function. So we will be looking at various structures that relate to childhood, adolescence, and now. Except remember, Kathy and I mostly Kathy came upon the me, myself, and I reality. The true me is the baby structure. This is our universal reality as babies, which is we thought about what we were looking at. We thought about what we see. And that forehead of the babies that just sticks right out there. That forehead is containing imagination, originality, interest, intuition, and the shape of the skull behind the face includes telepathy, and that wonderful extension of the primary visual area has to do with what in Europe is called vision and what in the American tradition is called psychic trend. And all of that is functioning in the baby structure right now. Right now. What does that tell you about the baby's learning machine? It is consciously associating what it thinks based on what it sees and what it feels. From the adult structure, the adult's forehead that you see in the picture, the conscious associational thinking structure is still there, but it's not as prominent, so it's not the priority. Instead, memory of past experience becomes the significant feature on our first response or reaction to challenge or opportunity. You would not expect the adult head to function in the same way as the baby head because of its functioning structure. But what's really important about understanding the structure and the function is how do you deal with it in yourself and with opportunity and challenge from outside? How do you deal with it most effectively? And we'll be talking about that. Not just about baby structure and adult structure, but also about the adolescent structure, because you know, really, dears, we have three bodies and three basic times in our life. Number one is the universal structure of childhood. Conscious association, thinking about what we see and hear, but mostly what we see. Then we get a new body in adolescence, and we also get a new structure of functioning brain activity. And this is built in, this is inherent from the very beginning of our lives, from conception. That with the DNA from mommy and daddy, which combines to be our own DNA, is included the structural changes that happen in adolescence. And it's not just breasts and blood and erections and orgasms. No, it isn't. It's not just pubic hair. It's much more than that, and we'll talk about that in this series. But mostly it's focused on what do you see as your own structure? How does it function? And how can it function most effectively for your highest good, moving into a partnering with life that moves you inside and outside toward oneness. Oneness within yourself, oneness with others, oneness with the environment. That's what you're looking at in this series. So the elements in this series are the emotional roadmap of where you are taking on this voyage of life, which is coming up later. The structure function that you yourself have from the beginning as a little child through the second body, which is adolescence, to your current reality, which is functionally the yourself that you believe to exist and that you are functioning as today. And at all of those stages in the programmed genetic changes of our development physically in this life comes the reality that it is choice that is our power. Choice, that is our power to either choose the positive possible that we want to create or to simply react according to the fear, pain that we have experienced so far in our life, and to try to avoid any further fear or pain. And usually the only strong emotion that can prompt a reaction to what we don't want is anger. But anger is only a cover-up of fear and grief and guilt and indifference and separation, which is not what we want. What do we want? Well, only by choice in a moment of stress, when challenged, can we create that positive possible future. So, a major element in this series is, what do you do with your own self in terms of choice? If you are feeling victimized by life, you're missing the point entirely. What you are being victimized by is your refusal to look to create what you want, instead of looking at what you don't want and reacting according to your past experience, which is not going to provide you with all of the answers. Anger is not an answer, it is only a reaction. Fear is not an answer, it is only a reaction. Keep your focus on developing your own power. And your own power is the choice to move toward oneness and what you do want, or allowing yourself to react according to what you don't want, which will take you really down to what you don't want, which is a feeling of being a victim, feeling powerless, and feeling threatened by life itself. Your me self, universally, our me self, is primarily represented by the structure of the baby. That's the pure me. What I see, sense, but mostly what I see, and maybe hear, and maybe taste, and maybe smell, is my reality. That's what I'm thinking about. That is going to change as we identify more clearly what is our I. What is our I? Which is basically set in adolescence. That's a different structure and a different function of brain as well as body. And then the great truth, which is true of the child, me, the me self. It is true of the identity of what I believe I am based on my past experience and learning, and the trueness of the self, myself, your myself, is not your present only and is not your past. It is also your future, if you choose to focus on the possibilities of the possible positive future that you want to have. So, my dear friend Kathy, as in Kathy Brannon, this is the adolescent self of the Kathy Brannon, and the structure is different than the Kathy Brannon which you see, understanding that the Kathy Brannon as a baby had this forehead and this primary occipital area, which meant that she, like all of us, and isn't that a wonderful contrast? She, as all of us, was focused on what she saw and what she thought about based on what she saw and what she felt. This is also true for the Albertine Fawn model, which had, as a little child, this same baby forehead and the same back of the head. So, Albertine, if you will just profile to me directly, look at the back of the head. Is this like the baby head, where there is the extreme visual primary center, the back of the skull? And the answer is no. So what has happened to Albertine as she went through the me structure of the baby, which is her genetic heritage as a human being, up to now? Well, sometime along that trip of life, you decided that it was going to be conscious. What you were going to react to was conscious. The forehead is still there, the originality, the imagination, the interest, the concentration, the intuition, and as we move backward toward the rear of your skull, the telepathy of the child. But now it's focused on not feeling, it is focused on facts, information, because you're older. And now you are dealing with an awareness of yourself, which the little baby does not have, not in detail, which is wonderful. You'll also notice that Miss Fawn has a nose that is not the nose of the baby, although it's more like it than mine is, or than Kathy's is. These are changes which are programmed into growing up. It's programmed with your DNA. But the DNA is so wonderful because it knows your future. It knows that you are going to be losing your baby forehead. It knows that you are going to be not so much focused on conscious associational thinking as in emotional reaction. It knows that, and it also knows about sexuality. That's in your DNA. Your DNA does come from mommy and daddy, but it's not limited to mommy and daddy. It could come from anywhere, through mommy, through daddy, anywhere on your genetic time track. Not just your grandparents, but their grandparents, their great-grandparents. Where does it come from? It comes from someone who actually lived in your historic past. And that's true for all of us. We represent not just our own lives, but we represent all of our ancestors, all of them. It's all happening right now. Understanding something more about yourself than you know right now is honoring the ancestors, as well as mommy and daddy, and as well as your past. In the Christian Bible, one of the major demands is honor thy father and thy mother. Okay, folks, that's good. Yeah, honor them because they gave you the form that began you from conception and guaranteed automatic changes throughout your structure and function during your life. Honor your ancestors, and you don't know really who they are. You don't know how far back your little brain is remembering. How many thousands of years? How many hundreds of years? How many hundreds of generations? You're you right now, but I, me, myself, my identity comes from a long genetic line, and each one of us, by empowering ourselves to create a positive possible future, is doing what generations past have wanted to do and did or didn't do during their own lifetime. Actually, from a DNA point of view, nobody really dies. If their DNA continues to go on through future generations, well, think about it, and you'll hear more about it. What if everyone who is on your past track is alive in you, and that you have the opportunity to transform their struggles in life their fears, their pain, their suffering, their hopes, their desires, their purpose as individuals. And we all have that opportunity. As we get better, all of the people on our genetic track get better also. And their influence is still working away in our memory cells. So, ... all of that's very interesting and probably true. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if you understood for yourself what your structure meant and means in your life today, and how, as a little child, how as an adolescent, how as the person you are right now, you could do it better and more easily. So, in this series, you'll be knowing more about your structure function. You'll be knowing more about your emotional time track as you go from the present, either into the past or into the future that you want to create. And you will have very specific things that you can do to bridge your stress in the moment in order to function most effectively as the yourself you have become. Your me is always there, the incredible power of the little child to learn, to adapt, to become. The incredible value of the sex role information which you're going to be dealing with, we all got to deal with as adolescents. What did the structural changes mean? And they mean something in each of our three bodies, our baby, our adolescent, and our right now in the mirror self, are telling you something, telling us something about how to create the oneness that we want, as opposed to the separation which we do not desire. All right, so I've been talking about structure function as it relates to the baby structure, the conscious associational thinking area, the projecting forehead, and the primary visual area, the projecting back of the skull, which is the occipital area of the brain. But that's the baby structure, and it's not concerned with language. It's concerned only with its immediate emotional reaction to what it is confronted with. It's learning by what it sees, peripherally by what it hears or what it senses. So what happens when we develop our own sense of identity? And that, thank God, takes us to Albertine and the I. What is our identity? Is it in the brain? Is it located in the brain? Well, you're on, Albertine.
This is a illustration of the left hemisphere of the brain. And as Daniel was mentioning, the baby picture, the primary focus is on the conscious associational thinking. So it's the forehead, and then the back of the brain is the primary visual center. As the baby evolves and grows up and becomes more identified with itself, the focus will be on the temporal side of the brain, where the belief system is. So that's where the person, the child, the adolescent start identifying with the I, and therefore it's basing all its experiences on past experiences and how it relates to its environment. So from a reaction point of view, you can make choices based on what happened to you in the past, or you can remember that you still have your forebrain and still look forward with your associations and not just filter your experiences through what happened in the past, so that you can make a choice based on the positive future that's possible.
May I?
Yes.
All right, so let us remember the temporal lobe of the brain, and it's a big one. It's a huge area compared with the conscious associational thinking area, is focused on intense feeling. So everything that you are challenged with or confronted with in present time is going back to how you felt about anything similar in your past. And all of that sense information, how you felt, what you heard, how it tasted, how it smelled, will all come together in a microsecond. And that is where our reaction comes from, but it's always intense. And it's based on our learning experience of life, which is focused on pain, fear, and fear of future pain. What we learn as we grow up and create our identity is what to avoid: fear, pain, fear of future pain, and the possibility of actually using the conscious associational thinking area to reflect on the positive possible future and how we could create it is the last thing that we come to, because our brain immediately is survival oriented, survival physically. So fear we avoid, pain we try to avoid. And of course we don't do it very well. So we try to avoid it so we don't have to deal with it. I'm sorry, carry on with identity, dear.
What I can add about this is, if I focus only on my past experiences and what I believe to be myself based on the past, am I reacting with emotions from the past, or am I also including what I'm consciously thinking in the present by, paying attention to my immediate environment and what I'm absorbing and observing visually? Am I really in the present, or am I reacting with anger and frustration and fear of more pain from the past because of my belief system around my experiences from the past? And that's where one needs to be able to remember to just be quiet and pay attention to what's going on really in the present moment, and not just think about, is this what I really believe myself to be? I'm gonna just talk stream of consciousness here about the I and identity and the adolescent growing up from the baby, and thinking about what it should be, how its role should be as a young adult, and the belief system around that.
Good.
And it's about, sex roles and
Excellent.
what's expected of he or she
Excellent.
based on belief systems.
Excellent.
Just to be clear about that, the structure function, the change in structure function is about adapting to a new environment and basing
Challenges and opportunities.
Challenges and opportunities on what he or she thinks should behave, as opposed to being honest about what it is it wants.
We have 3 periods of life, and there are 3 different bodies involved. Just as a reminder, one is the childhood structure, which has a very definite kind of function because of its structure. And then we come to adolescence. And instead of the relatively honest and spontaneous child reactions, we get the adolescent. And it is at the time of adolescence that we clearly define, or at least more clearly define, our I. What is our identity? What do we have to defend? Our identity, what we believe is true. And there are structural changes that go along with that, but more on the identity process, Albertine Fawn.
Yes, the identity revolves in this area here on the temporal lobe of the brain. It's where the belief system resides, and that's where we filter the information based on the past experiences, and we make our conclusions from there, as opposed to if we were to use the front of our brain, the conscious associational thinking, to see what's actually in the bigger picture, complemented by the primary visual center. If we were to look at the bigger picture, we would see that we have choices to create the future that we really want.
As
Instead,
opposed to just reacting according to how we have reacted in the past.
exactly, as opposed to reacting, which can be
So it's
automatic.
the difference between coming from the temporal lobe, which is all about intense emotion and past experience, to the frontal lobe, which is all about, well, what we can do now that's different.
Being in the present, as opposed to in the past.
So how did we get our I?
We got our I by thinking about what it is we want, what it is we don't want.
Mostly what it is we don't want, like what we want to avoid. We don't want more pain. We don't want more fear. So how have we handled fear and pain in the past? And that's what's the reaction is jammed into the present. But who is reacting to that? Is it the me of childhood? And the answer is no.
No, it's the me based on the past.
It's the I we have become to believe is true about us. And where does that come from?
That comes from limiting our belief system.
Well, it comes from limiting our belief system, but why do we limit it?
Because when in the face of a challenge, we go into automatic fear of wanting more pain, avoiding pain.
Sure, but who do we believe is the I? Who is Albert, or what is Albertine Fahn's I?
It's the ego identification.
Yes, it's the ego. It is what we feel we have to defend, which is our beliefs. What is true for me? And what is true for me based on my past experience may be totally useless in reacting to whatever the opportunity and the challenge is right now.
It is a point of reference, though, for what it is you don't want and then creating something that you do want.
Sure. So when you are confronted or threatened, what do?
I just become quiet and I put my hand on my forehead and I tell myself to look out of my right eye so I can engage my right brain.
I hope you really meant your left eye so that you could
did I
engage
say
your right
backwards?
brain. Sure you did, but I make that
I'm
mistake
just-
regularly
I'm
true.
dyslexic.
No, certainly that was wonderful because what you did, you become quiet. Mm-hmm. Actually, is that a successful way of avoiding further negative input from your brain?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, so
And breathing, getting back into breathing as opposed to talking and reacting.
yes. In other words, you give yourself a pause,
Yes.
and controlled breathing is certainly a pause, and controlled breathing does not mean it means slowly inhaling and slowly exhaling and making the choice consciously to do that. At which point you're not talking because you're controlling your breathing. And this gives you the opportunity, as you cleverly said, to take a look at what is actually going on out there.
Becoming present to what's really going on.
Becoming present to what's really going on. A reaction is not being present to what is going on. Because a reaction, by definition, is always coming from the past. You're doing it again. Mm-hmm. And if it has not been successful in the past, it will not be successful now. So you are very clever because in being quiet, you are giving yourself the opportunity to think. up here as opposed to react according to feeling, which is here. Feeling based primarily on memory of. Oh, yeah, sure. There's no power in reaction. There's only antagonism and anger, fear, and other unproductive emotional swamps that we get stuck in. And how do we express our anger or our fear? By rationalizing verbally, trying to convince the other person of the correctness of our position, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'm validating the emotions based on past experience, usually.
Yes, that's wonderful. Validating our own lack of success in the past and trying to make our suffering respectable.
Honorable.
Yes, honorable. Well, and of course it isn't, which is really wonderful, and we know that it's not. So, how do we stop that? We stop that, as Albertine has said, by doing something consciously to put on the brakes. But it's not retreat, and it's not avoidance, and it's not withdrawal. It's just giving ourselves, by controlled breathing, the opportunity to think.
And be present.
And hopefully be present and accepting and receptive and interested, maybe even fascinated by the possibilities.
Even maybe being willing to look at something differently.
Well, certainly if you don't make the decision to be willing to look at something differently, you won't, which is the usual human condition. And unfortunately, because it's such a good example, I bring it up again. The Jerry Springer audience and the Maury Povich audience, in which all they do is rationalize and justifies their own positions, shrieking and screaming and not listening to the opportunity that is presented to them, which is, why don't you just shut up and listen? Maybe then you could make some decisions that will take you more toward what you want. But we're so tied up with who we are, our ego, I am special, important, should be understood. They are all our enemy because they are not listening to us.
Well, one would think that after hearing ourselves talk about the drama we're recreating, one would want to create something different.
Well, that's wisdom. But on the other hand, in the face, or in the horror story, the maelstrom of negative emotion, that's the last thing we think about because of who we believe ourselves to be. Yes, you're right, based on our past experience and what we have learned. But what we have learned, unfortunately, is not just useful information. What we have learned is what we have developed as a habit, which is only a knee-jerk response to challenge. So, yeah, we've got to put on the brake, and it's easy as a human being to do that. Unfortunately, it's difficult when issues of our sex role, our sexuality, ourself as the individual we believe.
Yeah, and it's
ourselves to
also
be.
what we believe is expected of us.
Oh, yeah, and what we believe is expected of us, which is back to ego, which is back to ego. Sure, and we have lost our power when we are trying to make correct our expression of our ego, when we're rationalizing, when we're justifying. Oh, yes. Well, the little kid was born with this structure, and that structure had within it a purpose, and that purpose is individual, and it is based on the mechanics of the structure you were born with. Back to the baby, yes, its structure indicates the beginning of its individual purpose in this life. That's all inherent to the structure, because in adolescence, there are going to be changes which make that individual purpose much more clear. Plus, of course, the fact that for the adolescent, the opportunities that life has presented in terms of information or specific events or the opportunity to investigate specific interests, that's all come up, but it doesn't be registering clearly for little children. It does register clearly once we decide on what kind of man or woman we expect and others expect of us to be. So the second body, the adolescent body, is clearly focused on sex role, whatever that is, in our belief system. That's our part of our expected I. Just as a theoretical introduction to the structure function of childhood and the changes which are going to happen in adolescence, which will be more taken up on another segment in this series, let's move on to the self. Me, the child reality, which is all life as perceived as a I like it or I don't like it, as what's like me and I feel good about that, and what I don't like, which is not me, and how I resist that and want someone else to appreciate what I am feeling. We move on to that eternal part of us, which is as long as we're alive, which is life itself in us. Life itself in us, it is our life, not modified by structure, not modified by age. The real self. That's a capital S self. So, all right, self, speak to self.
So, myself, it's all about now, and it's all about the person you see in that mirror. So, it shows up with a lessening of my lips and lines in my face. And Daniel could explain those lines more exacting. But I think an important part for me in all of this conversation is that when I came into this work with structure function, it was after 10 years before I had been in a car accident with a brain injury. And I was looking for who I was. I had no memory of me. So I didn't know. People would react to me, and I didn't know if that was really who I was or just who they thought I was. Because people were putting, responsibilities on me that I had no idea that I could even possibly achieve. And then when I got connected with Daniel Whiteside and the brilliance...
And Mr. Gordon Stokes.
And, of course, Mr. Gordon Stokes, and the brilliance of structure function, I began to learn the me that I am with my jaws that got developed in my adolescence, that show people that I am an authority. But I myself didn't think of myself that way. My eyes are close set, so I didn't have the confidence to continue with being that authority. And now, as my aging, I have these lines that say people are never going to listen to me. And my lips, my upper lip, which used to be a lot fuller, says that people aren't, that I'm not able to communicate my feelings.
But you want to.
But I definitely want to, but that I'm not able to, and so I can't really fully express myself throughout my body.
Did you hear that? I can't fully accept myself. That's the I, that's the identity that says this is not like me.
Right.
And that takes us back to the baby, and if it's not like me, I don't do it. fear, pain, and the rest of it, it's
Yeah.
not worth it.
Oh, sure. I've been shut down a lot with talking my feelings. So, yeah. So my ego, who cannot survive inside of, confrontation or merely standing up for myself. And there's been a lot of denial of who I am through my experience with other people. I have intuition and psychic from my childhood. And when I would talk to people about what I was perceiving, they would tell me I was crazy. I was making it up. And of course I believed that because I had no memory. I had no ability to know that I had any kind of ability to just know things. So after 10 years of dealing with this, I found Structure Function and Gordon Stokes and Daniel Whiteside. And I am now able to be present with my three bodies, my child, my adolescent, and my adult. And when things happen to me, when I'm challenged with an opportunity that's unfamiliar to me, I can step back, I can control my breathing, and I can know that I am capable and equal to any task. And that is the beauty of this work, and that is what we're all here for, is to share it with you and to encourage you to be able to investigate, well, what is it about me that I don't know at this point? That my life is instinctively pushing me towards knowing. And contact us and give us the opportunity to expand your knowledge of yourself and your knowledge of what's possible and staying true to who you are.
What Kathy just did is a wonderful example of doing what this program is all about, which is, so she's been here for a couple of hours, and I've been doing what I've been doing. You've been doing what you're doing, and she has been sitting on it, waiting for, quote, her turn to come, which is the opportunity. And look what she did. She outlined it all, reviewed it all very nicely. And the bottom line is if you have any doubt about your own power is in choice. Your own power is in making a choice to consciously monitor your negative reaction and transform it into an awareness of the positive possible that you want in this situation. You're going to be hearing in this series a whole lot more about structure function, and in this general discussion, we have not said more or less what you can do in the moment to get yourself reoriented back to your self as opposed to your I, or the poor wretched child who suffered and began their belief system based on fear, pain, and fear of future pain. Sure, the person in the mirror is now, and the power available in now is choice, and that is the choice to move consciously toward the positive possible, which begins with your monitoring your own reaction and giving yourself a space between the negative that the belief system that your I will immediately produce, and putting yourself in contact with the oneness with all life, which is life itself. And Kathy has had a great blessing because in this automobile accident that she went through, her memory of her past was eliminated. So she was consciously starting from zero in present time. What an opportunity. I see that as a great blessing. I think we could all profit from such accidents because then we know that we're starting to build our awareness of ourself. Why not start now? Now is the time.
Yes, without the accident.
Well,
It's-
with or
it-
without the
well,
accident,
yes.
yes.
But having gone through the accident part of it, I know that what's available here now is everything that I had available at that moment. Because there are steps to identifying and releasing and creating what it is that you want.
Okay, and that's what this series is all about. We had that power most clearly as little children. As adolescents, it got very confused through issues of sexual identity and sex role and the expectations of others. What are your expectations for yourself? You will not find them by simply repeating the past. That recycling proposition is functionally a real waste of time. It is all about now. Now is the only time, as my dear friend and life partner, Gordon Stokes would say, the only time that you have power is now. And the evidence of now is the choices that you make now that will move you out of the past and into the future that you want to create. This series is all about knowing yourself. Who is that person in the mirror? That is truly yourself. But do you know yourself? Do you have a sense of purpose? Because it's inborn and is always available to be contacted. Well, Albertine, my dear, what, if anything, do you want to add to all of that?
Well, listening to Kathy's story and having this amazing bag of tools that this work offers, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just take the moment for what it is, instead of running it through our belief system? I mean, it is important to be able to think critically, but also to be able to make a choice based on the present is really where the power is. And we do have free will to do that. So why not embrace that power and really create the experience that we want in the moment?
Yes.
And, you know, memory or not, it's really about what's going on now.
We were born with a purpose. We were born to be who we are. Who is that person in the mirror? What does the structure function tell you about that person and that purpose that is inherent to every cell of your body? If you have felt that purpose was something missing in your life, pay attention to this series. It will give you not just a clue, but will give you some very specific information about you and your purpose in this life. So, we welcome your contact, and do check in on the YouTube for Daniel Whiteside regularly, because Daniel Whiteside has the benefit of wonderful additional information from a Kathy Brannon, who is devoted to this subject, and an Albertine Fan, who is devoted to this subject. In other words, we are devoted to our own self-fulfillment. Aren't you?